So, with all of the speculation in regards to the leaks that are occurring for House of the Dragons episode 8 for the second season, there has been some negativity that's been garnered, and I'm sure there's a group of people, maybe a large group of people, who actually are not big fans of House of the Dragon or the portrayal of the story of the Dance of the Dragons from Fire and Blood. But you know what? I still love House of the Dragon. I'm still enjoying House of the Dragon, and I don't know if I'm alone on this, and you can let me know if you're enjoying it as well, even with some grievances. I'm pointing out flaws in some of these videos that I've done here this past week, and I'm pointing out some things that I find imperfect, and maybe some creative decisions that I would prefer went in a different direction. But I think it's okay. When I compare it to other shows or movies, this is the primary thing that I've been invested in here as far as my TV entertainment. And, you know, I don't have that many problems. And a big thing that I really have enjoyed is having something to look forward to every Sunday. And there's also a part of me that's looking forward to this season being over so I can go back through and binge watch the whole series from season 1, episode 1, all the way through episode 8 of season 2, and just experience it that way, as I have done with Game of Thrones over the past however many years now, multiple times. And as much as I don't like the way Game of Thrones ended, I still find myself enjoying the experience when I go back through and I binge watch every single episode. Now, I say that I still love House of the Dragon because there are things that it still does well. There are a lot of beautiful scenery, really well shot, as far as the director of photography per episode. Now that might change here and there with different direction, different directors, different writers. Things are presented a little bit differently, and it is a collaborative effort. And one thing that I think that a lot of people ignore or don't focus on, they always want to lean heavily into their criticisms, specifically on the showrunners. And D&D, I think, kind of laid a great platform out there, or establish a foundation for people to be very critical of those in charge of the series. But the person that's really in charge of the series is really a group of people, a corporation. It's Warner Brothers, it's HBO. There are creative decisions that probably do get interrupted, not to mention with the writer's strike that occurred that maybe disrupted season 2 a little bit. But, I do these raw take videos where it's not very glamorous as far as what you're seeing on the screen, and you're just listening to me talk and kind of express how I feel in the moment, how I'm thinking in the moment. There's a lot going on. I actually live in the States. I'm sure you can tell by my accent. It's pretty generic, you could say. But there's a lot going on politically in this country right now, and globally as well. There's conflicts in the Middle East, there's conflicts with Ukraine and Russia, and people get really bogged down on some of these more pressing matters that definitely have more weight than what is happening in our favorite TV show, our favorite books, our author not finishing A Song of Ice and Fire. So, it's something to have perspective on. And when I take the time to really jump into any of the 5 books in the main series, or if I go back through and read Fire and Blood, or I actually like to go back through and read The Princess and the Queen, because it's just presented slightly different. There's some differences there, things that are retconned once you get to Fire and Blood. But this is something that I think is pretty impressive, and I'm sure there's executive interference from the very top of HBO, and I don't know how big of an impact that makes. But I enjoy the presentation a lot. I think the dragons look better than they ever have. Sometimes there's some weird CGI moments, but nothing, again, is perfect. I like that we get to explore some of these characters that we had only heard about. And, as far as things being canonical, maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. Is this book canon? Is it just show canon? If they're tying everything into Game of Thrones with some of these visions with Daemon and prophecy, I don't know how I feel about that entirely, but I am still very intrigued. I'm still very interested in learning where they're going to take this. I want to know how they tie that in, knowing that we have a definitive conclusion to Game of Thrones. Is that the definitive conclusion to A Song of Ice and Fire? Probably not. Maybe it's similar. It's got some similarities, similar traits, but it's going to definitely be different if we ever do get The Winds of Winter, or if we ever get Dream of Spring. Very far-fetched pipe dreams, you could say. But these are characters that I read about in The Princess and the Queen and Fire and Blood. And, like Daemon, for example, in The Rogue Prince. These are general outlines. We get ideas of some of the actions that they took, or what is reported, or, stated, documented in world histories that, these are fictional histories in world of a fictional world that is Westeros. And our author really does like to play with his readers a lot, as far as what we're perceiving as reality may not actually be the reality. It may not be the truth. And I think that is an interesting concept. But the way it's presented, these characters are not very well fleshed out. And like Alicent, for example, that's one of the primary characters I hear people say is butchered. And, well, she's far more developed in House of the Dragon. Even if it is inconsistent, it's more than what we get in Fire and Blood. So I'm still very curious to see where this character is going to go. Is there going to be a reconciliation with her and Rhaenyra? Maybe, maybe not. With Daemon, is he this guy that was just, was so opposed to falling in line, but now he maybe wants to latch on to Rhaenyra's cause, and maybe he doesn't, and there's these questions, and how is that portrayed? Are the individual character arcs for each season, are they developed well enough? I don't know, but they are definitely developed far more than they are in Fire and Blood. Do they meet my preferences always? Absolutely not. But there's a lot to love here. There's a lot of heart that's put into this, and I don't think that the writing is shallow, as may be suggested by critics. And by critics, I mean fans. Most critics from more, established online media or reviewers, magazines, that kind of thing, I think they're a little bit more patient with this series. They're not holding it to the standard of the writer, the original author, George R.R. Martin. So there's that to consider. I just think maybe we are a little bit harsher on this because we are so jaded by Game of Thrones, that anything that's inconsistent with what our assumptions or expectations are, it really does derail our enjoyment and our experience for the show. And I'm guilty of this too. When they don't do something that matches what I think should be happening, what I think a majority of the book fans expect to have happen, I mean, it disrupts things a little bit as far as my enjoyment. And, I'm trying to look at the show in a vacuum, separate from Fire and Blood, probably separate from A Song of Ice and Fire. And that's going to be kind of difficult to do. That's what we ultimately needed to do with Game of Thrones. But even within the vacuum of it just being its own thing, a TV series, Game of Thrones had a lot of things that I think are disappointing. I don't know about lazy writing. I don't like the term lazy writing, but there are decisions that they made. D&D are definitely not people applauded within the A Song of Ice and Fire community, but not even the show-only Game of Thrones community either, because there are inconsistencies, things that, characters are not consistent from season to season or episode to episode, and there's plenty of critic takes on YouTube that you can watch these videos where you break it down, and it's like, wow, these characters say things that are just not congruent with how they portrayed themselves just an episode or two ago. It seems like characters forget who they are or what they represented in earlier seasons. And I don't know, is House of the Dragon falling into that a little bit? Sometimes. I feel like Daemon is a character that it's difficult to see a consistency there. And that's kind of upsetting to watch. But most shows aren't perfect. Most stories are not perfect. I mean, I look at a character like Viserys. I thought that was so beautifully portrayed in the first season of House of the Dragon. I thought Paddy Considine was totally ripped off and absolutely snubbed as far as Emmy consideration. and that was disappointing. I wonder if because of some of the inconsistent reception from the audience or the fans, and maybe even reviewers, will Rhys Ifans' episode 2 here in season 2 of House of the Dragon, will that not get the acknowledgement that it deserves? Is he not going to get the accolades that he deserves for his portrayal there in episode 2? The same thing with Tom Glencarney for Aegon. I think some of these characters, I think this show is very well acted. Some of the writing does seem inconsistent, but bringing these characters to life when I felt that, it is really difficult to know exactly what they were thinking. A character like Helena, if you read the books, this is a character that really had nothing to live for, and she was permanently damaged from what occurred with the Blood and Cheese situation with Jaehaerys being murdered. And she never truly recovers in the book, while here in the show, I think we are getting a little bit more depth to her character. Am I a huge fan of what I saw in the leaks? No, but I'm a bigger fan of this version of Helena than the version of Helena that we get in Fire and Blood. But here lies the problem with Fire and Blood, is that I project a lot onto Helena's character in Fire and Blood, as far as, and I think other fans do this too, correct me if I'm wrong, but we create a version of these characters that just simply does not exist within the actual text. So what we imagine this character is like, there's nothing that actually suggests that in the book. We are filling in a lot of gaps, where House of the Dragon is giving us a real-time experience of these characters. So when we see Helena here in the final episode of season 2, maybe it's not what we're wanting, but it's better than the nothing that we get in the book. And I think that's true for a lot of characters. Rhaenyra, I have my problems with how slowly her character is being developed here in season 2. But again, she's so much more than what I experienced in Fire and Blood. And Fire and Blood is seeing her morally questionable acts, her decision making. It's a lot different, I think, than her portrayal here in House of the Dragon. And maybe House of the Dragon has been too patient with developing her further. But we are going to, if she goes into a darker direction, I think we're going to feel that far more than we possibly could have in Fire and Blood. I don't feel that in Fire and Blood at all. I don't feel like these characters are super nuanced. I don't feel like they are the epitome of morally gray characters. We don't have any of their inner monologues. We don't have real perspective from these characters. So I look at this show and I look at other depictions of other book to show adaptations or book to movie adaptations, and this is just a really, really weird source material to adapt. It's almost impossible to make as climatic as you would like it to be, because when you look at the book, there are not a ton of climaxes that really feel like, man, there is a lot of weight in that, not necessarily in the build-up, but also in the aftermath. Where the Red Wedding, there's a lot of build-up to it, and there's a lot of aftermath to it. The Purple Wedding, there's a lot of build-up to it, and there's a lot of aftermath to it. In Fire and Blood, a big moment can happen. Like Blood and Cheese happens, and then it just moves right along into the next big plot beat that occurs in that war. And the same thing occurs with Rook's Rest. The Battle of the Gullet is something that I think some fans might be disappointed that we don't get it this season. I think, as slow as this season feels, if they added the Battle of the Gullet at the end of season 2 here, say we got it in the final episode, it would feel like, oh man, we got to that point really fast. I think it would feel fast because there hasn't been a ton of buildup to that plot point. And then if you go back to the book, there's not a ton of buildup for it in the book. So whatever they're doing in the show is giving us more than we got in the book. And isn't that ultimately the goal? Is not necessarily to change the source material, but if you do, to have that enhance the source material as much as possible. Where I felt like Game of Thrones, as far as the moments of spectacle, where we do see dragons, where we do see the White Walkers, where we do see bigger battles, you're able to enhance that experience of that aspect of the story. But then the more nuanced, the more subtle details of storytelling, that's where Game of Thrones, I felt, didn't enhance A Song of Ice and Fire, where I don't think that's true with Fire and Blood. I think the smaller details, the smaller political dramas within Fire and Blood are actually being enhanced in House of the Dragon, regardless of whether or not we enjoy the direction they're going in. And there are some inconsistencies there that, regardless of the source material, I think people could objectively look at and be like, ah, man, that doesn't really land. I look at the Rhaenys situation as like the biggest, I would say the biggest sin of House of the Dragon so far. And I'm sure other people have their opinions of what really didn't work for them so far in House of the Dragon. That's the main one for me, is Rhaenys. But at the same time, I look at some of these other moments. I really like Adam of Hall. I like that Sea Smoke ultimately claimed him and not the other way around. I like that he wasn't participating in basically this lineup of potential Targaryen descendants, the Dragon Seeds. I like that he wasn't a part of that. I don't like that Nettles is missing. I don't think we're going to get Nettles. I think it's very clear that Rhaena is going to ultimately claim Sheepstealer. I think that's been set up. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying this. And I think that's going to upset a lot of people. But I kind of like the mystery that there is with Nettles in Fire and Blood. I'm not super attached to anything that occurs in Fire and Blood. So if they can make this Rhaena Sheepstealer moment, if they can make this really interesting and make it impactful, then I'm kind of all for it. It just really does depend on how these things go. I look at Kristen Cole too. I know a lot of people wanted this Kingmaker character and we didn't get it. And I'm upset that we didn't get it either. But I also do like his portrayal in this show. Show fans and book fans alike do not like this guy, and that's the intended effect. But I'm also seeing a character that seems shell-shocked after he experienced Rook's Rest. That's not what we got out of the book at all. So we're getting a little bit more layers to a character like Kristen Cole. I thought they were going to do something really interesting with Kristen Cole and Alicent. I mean, bigger than just a secret affair and this way of them kind of digesting their emotions or their guilt and how they deal with that. They seem to need to be doing that together, and they're not going to experience that together. I don't think that we're going to get much more development from those two characters or that relationship than we already have. I don't like that, but I did like to see maybe that guilt that we saw with Kristen Cole and him projecting that guilt onto Sir Auric Cargyle and ultimately setting up the Cargyle battle there on Dragonstone. I thought that was a really good decision. I thought that was a good creative decision. And then seeing his interactions there with Gwaine Hightower, I think these are really I like the way Gwaine sees Kristen Cole. I think we get a little bit more there. And I'm fascinated, basically just off of the trailer for episode 8. I like that there this brewing conflict between those two, and you add in the secret affair with Kristen Cole and Alicent, and it maybe adds a little bit more weight if there is an ultimate confrontation between Kristen Cole and Gwaine Hightower. It's yet to be seen, but these are things that I'm curious. Are we going to see that? Are we not going to see that? Are we going to see something different? I'm still excited. I'm still filled with anticipation for what's going to happen next. And if there's if there's just one thing I want you to take away from this, is that I know that people are disappointed with certain elements of this story, but if you're like me, I still have a lot of anticipation moving forward. I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to see what happens even after episode 8 of season 2 and what we get out of season 3. And then what's even more exciting is, while it might seem like a long waiting 2 years until we get that next season, get to season 3, and it felt like a long wait to get to season 2, the differences between season 2 and season 3 is I think we're all going to absolutely fall in love with the Dunk and Egg adaptation that's going to fall right in between these two seasons. So we'll get season 1 of Dunk and Egg, and that's something to be excited for. So whether you love House of the Dragon, hate it, or you're kind of in the middle, we're going to have something really special, I think, to look forward to that's going to fall right in between season 3 or season 2 going into season 3. But that's it, guys. I just want to try to have some sort of optimism, or maybe a more favorable opinion of House of the Dragon out there. I know there's a lot of negativity circling this series right now. I share some of that, but I don't think it's all entirely a lost cause. I think there's a lot to look forward to in this series. I think seeing Rhaenyra develop from what everybody thinks is too clean of a character, too good of a character, too reluctant of a character, I think we're going to see significant changes for her moving forward. And if they can turn the audience against her, I think that will be one of the greatest accomplishments of this series. As far as getting people to be more positive about Daemon or seeing him in a more favorable light, I kind of feel like they're dropping the ball on that. Regardless of what happens here in episode 8, I don't know that they are going to have this organic redemption song for Daemon's character, but we'll see. But those are just my thoughts, guys. I want to put something a little bit more positive out there. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and you can click right here for some more House of the Dragon content.